Take a look at these shots from season 14. Now compare them to the first season. Did you notice the difference between them? Some immediately convey the atmosphere of a good horror movie, while the others, despite having a cool location, just feel like shots from a forest. For some reason, nowadays the visuals in TV series have become sterile. And we feel it because studios no longer shoot a finished frame, but rather save material for post-production. But early Supernatural worked differently. Its cinematic quality was created right on set, not from the lighting, camera, or color grading by themselves, but from the decisions made by people. The gaffer, the colorist, and the cinematographer. Each of them helped to tell the story. And it's not about film being better than digital. It's just that when working with film, you couldn't simply go back and redo the lighting in the shot after it was filmed. No, you had to know in advance where the actor would stand, how they would move, and how they would perform. To understand what I'm talking about, you need to see it. No, more than that, you need to feel it. Scenes from the first season instantly immerse you in the dark and realistic world of the Winchester brothers. Thanks to its rich cinematic language, the views of Vancouver create the image of small-town America with empty highways, forests, and abandoned houses, which made it possible to realistically bring many urban legends to life. And that's because the creators of the series set themselves a crazy goal from the very beginning, to shoot Supernatural like a major motion picture. In 2005, with a budget of $2 million per episode, this sounded like an absolutely impossible task. Among fans, Eric Kripke is often worshipped for this, but it only became possible thanks to the efforts of the entire team. Supernatural was Kripke's first experience as a showrunner. Before that, he had only stood out with a couple of festival shorts, the script for Tarzan, and his work on Boogeyman. That experience was enough for Warner Brothers to give him a chance at his own show. However, he first pitched a series about a tabloid journalist who travels across America investigating supernatural cases. And only after the studio rejected that idea did the concept emerge for a road movie-style series about two brothers inspired by stories about Route 66 and the X-Files. What I mean is that Kripke had an idea, but not a final vision. So today, I'll be exploring how the show's visual style was formed, figuring out who deserves credit for the show's success and why, and also explaining why the series later started to look worse. And believe me, the reasons aren't as obvious as they seem. When the pilot script took shape, the studio began looking for a director who could sell the show from the very first episode. And they chose David Nutter. In the industry, this man is known as the king of pilot episodes. Out of the 24 pilots he directed, 21 were picked up as series. Among these projects were Smallville and Tarzan, where he had already worked with Kripke. In addition, Nutter managed to direct 15 episodes of The X-Files, so the showrunner couldn't have dreamed of a better director for the pilot episode. And for the series, this was practically a golden ticket, since for Supernatural, he was also an executive producer, and when the studio needed someone capable of building mythology, Nutter immediately told Eric, "You need Shiban." He also helped with casting Jensen Ackles, whom he knew from the series Dark Angel and Smallville. In short, David isn't the kind of person who shoots a pilot and then leaves. Here's how he describes his own work.
I get involved at the very earliest stages and stay until the very end, when the multi-track sound is mixed down to stereo and the project is delivered. I'm present at every stage: sound, color correction, editing, all of post-production, test screenings, everything.
For Nutter, a pilot isn't just a single episode. It's an opportunity to set the tone for the entire show. And it's no surprise that it was important to him to create an atmosphere for the actors where they could feel confident, so that Sam and Dean would come across as real brothers. The director also helped establish the principle of less is more. This meant that the horror in the series had to be built on suspense, darkness, and silhouettes. The crew tried to show the monsters as little as possible and use practical effects as much as they could, which made filming the scenes with Mary quite heated. Nutter literally said, "As soon as you start to feel warm, run." As a result, this approach had a positive effect not only on the atmosphere, but also on the show's budget. So the team was assembled and given a tough task: Essentially, their job wasn't just to shoot the first episode, but to prove that it was possible to deliver a mini horror film every week, without a big movie budget and much faster. At the same time, it was important that not only the studio, but also the viewers believed in Sam and Dean. Without chemistry between them, neither the horror nor the family drama would have worked at all. And what could make people believe in them? Pain, the kind that wounds but also motivates. That's where the decision to kill the Winchester brothers' mother came from. They lost their father too. No, he survived of course, but he could no longer be their parent. Mary's horrific death turned him into a cold mentor who raised his children as obedient soldiers. This approach shapes the opening visuals. The grim imagery introduces a dangerous alien presence into the Winchesters' cozy life. This is also where the flickering light and baby monitor noise first appear, becoming recurring supernatural markers in the series. At times, the characters are reduced to mere silhouettes. This subtle work is the work of Aaron Schneider. He served as the cinematographer for the pilot, bringing a striking contrast between light and darkness to the series. In the dialogue, creators reveal characters through the actors' performances rather than words. Acting is key in the scene introducing Dean. The way they look at each other and listen to their partner shows the brothers' relationship and how their father raised them. But here Kripke fell into a trap. He needed a scene that could provide exposition without turning into a character profile. A scene that could give the characters not just a goal, but also motivation. This was so difficult that the scene was rewritten and filmed only a month after the main shoot. This leads to an almost ironclad rule. Every creative shot must primarily serve the story. The staircase scenes are used by the cinematographer to show who dominates the dialogue, elevating one or putting them on equal footing. Shadows from the grills emphasize the discussion of their difficult childhood. Even in the pilot, the lighting crew precisely highlighted details while keeping the image as dark as possible. And this focus on functionality is consistently maintained. The ghost is filmed as if we are looking at it through someone else's eyes. In a simple dialogue, the cameraman constantly changes the distance, as if dancing around the characters, and the empty cafe is explained by the sign from the previous shot. Even for small scenes, realistic locations are set up, like the motel where their father stayed. What impresses me most here is how this short shot with Sam is constructed, when he listens to the message from Jess. She's not just his girlfriend, she's a true light in his dark story. A little later, other recurring elements of the series appear, noir lighting and the real pride of the props department, their father's journal. Moreover, they decided not just to end the pilot, but to bring it full circle. The nightmare from the opening repeats in the same order. First the staircase, then the death on the ceiling, and finally the red light on their faces. This is how Sam receives the same trauma that his brother and father live with. In this way, David Nutter and Aaron Schneider established the visual DNA of the series and secured its cinematic look. However, the problems didn't end there. Imagine being Eric Kripke, your dreams realized. The series idea you nurtured for a decade is finally on screen. Nearly 6 million people watched the pilot, and Warner Brothers orders a full season. But the first episode was filmed in Los Angeles. And as ironic as it may sound, filming a show about America in America is too expensive. So the show moves to Vancouver, Canada. This is not an uncommon story. Canada is much more attractive for filming. Tax breaks, world-class production facilities, and picturesque, diverse landscapes that can imitate all of America. Vancouver has an ocean shoreline, mountains, fields, and suburbs. And although LA is also quite diverse, there is one thing it can't embody. That is gloom, cold, and rain. And despite the advantages, the move brings new problems. David Nutter was invited to direct the second episode as well, but almost all the work had to start from scratch. Essentially, he had to shoot another pilot, but with a new team that also needed help getting into the spirit of the series. And all of this with half the budget and production time. The production of the series in Vancouver was overseen by Cyrus Yavne and George Griff. They assembled the teams and created the schedules. And the bridge between production and creativity was Robert Singer. He worked with the writers, hired actors and directors, and essentially he was the person who maintained the balance between what was desired and what was possible. For the series, he was the co-showrunner alongside Kripke. He also directed 49 episodes over 15 years. His role in shaping the style of the series was crucial. If Kripke came up with the concept, then Singer made sure it worked on screen. He was also the one who hired the main cinematographer, who joined the series right after the pilot and shot 320 episodes out of 327. Serge Ladouceur himself emphasizes that it was Singer who believed in his ideas for visual solutions. The French-Canadian cinematographer also perfectly matched Kripke's vision, who wanted to make the supernatural as realistic as possible. Yes, Schneider laid the foundation, but it was Serge who maintained the standard of quality and developed his ideas on a smaller budget, streamlining the production process. The early episodes were often criticized for being too dark, but that was a deliberate old-school choice. Serge's team established a recognizable style, deep shadows and sharp contrast, with light falling precisely on what matters. He drew on the noir school of lighting and techniques from The X-Files, where darkness isn't the absence of light, but a deliberate device. Every episode was filmed with one question in mind: how would this look in a good horror movie? And they managed to achieve that, despite the limitations. That's largely why Serge stuck with the series for so many years. The show constantly presented him with cinematographic challenges, since up until the 8th season there were practically no permanent locations. Director and producer Kim Manners had no less of an impact on the series. He took over the series right after Nutter, and from that moment worked in tandem with Serge. Here's how he remembers Kim.
Kim was a designer of the frame. He prepared meticulously, thinking through the mechanics of every shot. Yes, he had a strong influence on the early look of the show, and there really is a lot of The X-Files in the DNA of Supernatural. Many people on the crew had worked on that series. Kim was with us until the beginning of the 4th season. I learned a lot from him.
Yes, unfortunately, Kim died of cancer in 2009. He came in as a director, but quickly became an executive producer, essentially a mentor to the directing team. In just 3 years, he helped shape the show's visual style. A huge loss for the team and fans. Manners' contribution cannot be overstated. His directing style is easily recognizable. Every scene is meticulously crafted, both in terms of composition and lighting. He knew how to find beautiful cinematic solutions even for TV projects. And personally, I want to thank him for the episodes Dead in the Water, Scarecrow, and Shadow. In general, it was these people who shaped Supernatural into the show I came to love. And now that you understand how important the team was to this project, we can discuss the visual choices. It's worth starting with lighting, because for Serge Ladouceur, it's a way to tell the story. Before setting up the lights, he reads the script in advance and plans the lighting so that the viewer feels the mood of the scene even before the first line is spoken. Yes, usually the director sets the direction, but it's the cinematographer who maintains the show's style from episode to episode. Initially, Supernatural borrowed visual techniques from The X-Files, but out of a desire to depict the world realistically and darkly, they developed their own rules. The lighting must be motivated, and the shadows fade into deep black. Kodak Vision 2 film helped a lot with this, as it was able to preserve details in the shadows when needed. At the same time, the crew clearly understood, not everything that can be shown needs to be shown. The contrast between dark and light made the image cinematic, and form was more important than texture, so they imitated the bleach bypass method digitally. I'll explain in more detail later, but the main thing it provides is high contrast and reduced saturation. Because of this, it was necessary to pay closer attention to exposure and to select in-frame lighting during filming. I think you've noticed that in movies, they try not to use ordinary chandeliers because such lighting creates unattractive shadows on the face. Instead, lights are more often placed to the side, in front, or in the background of the shot. In Supernatural, there's always some kind of floor lamp, an open window with moonlight, or a neon sign in the background that motivates the lighting. Naturally, these sources aren't enough to light the scene, but they allow filmmakers to make scenes more realistic, and as a result, viewers don't question where the light is coming from. Plus, lamps work as decor and help set the mood. From the very first scene, the series uses practical lighting. At the same time, despite the number of lamps, the image remains dark. Besides, it's hard to imagine anything supernatural these days without a flickering floor lamp, so you can even spot lamps on the table in the bar. Congratulations, now you'll start noticing floor lamps in every movie. And although the main goal is to make the lighting motivated, lamps can serve different purposes. In Bobby's house, each lamp lights up books and papers, highlighting this place as an information center. But in the restaurant, they create an unusual sense of warmth and coziness. Although Sam is still left in the shadows, emphasizing his detachment from ordinary life. In one of the episodes, lamps are even used as a way to reference The Shining. But my favorite shot using practical lighting was in the moving episode. The woman has already taken out the floor lamp, but hasn't had time to unpack the rest of the boxes yet. It's hard to imagine a more effective way to justify such gloomy and specific lighting. And the same logic applies to fire within the frame. Mostly these are scenes of burning bones or objects to which spirits are attached. Interestingly, real fire is often used in such shots, and to ensure faces are lit properly, dimmers imitate the flickering flames. Without real fire, actual light is mixed with CGI. But before resorting to effects, everyone tries to do things the old-fashioned way. It is not just the light that matters, but also the shadows it casts. The beams of light streaming through the slats of the blinds have become one of the show's most recognizable techniques. And so that it doesn't come across as just a stylistic element, the lighting crew always tries to consider how it will affect the emotions. For example, in the scene with the demon exorcism at Bobby's house, or in the interrogation scene where one of the characters shares details of his difficult life. This noir technique also fits perfectly into scenes related to the brothers' detective work. A special mention should go to the episode where the windows create a graphic texture and contrast, giving the impression that the heroine is trapped in a cage. And pay attention to this scene, where the sparse beams of light combined with the tilted camera create a strong sense of intrigue and tension. But in the street scenes, the main source of light is Vancouver itself with its unique climate. Thanks to this, most scenes are lit with soft, diffused light and filled with a gentle mist. At the same time, if the weather was sunny, the cinematographer didn't try to block out the sun completely, but simply positioned the actors so that the sun was behind them. This way, their faces weren't blown out by harsh daylight, and a beautiful outline appeared along the edges. To keep the light soft, Serge covered the actors with diffusing fabric, acting like a small cloud above them. Sometimes he added a reflector from below to fill in facial shadows. The muted color grading helped maintain the somber mood. Despite all this, the film crew didn't shy away from any weather.
We basically didn't have any backup sets. If it rained, we filmed in the rain. Over all these years, we only changed the schedule 3 times, and only when good weather was absolutely essential. Otherwise, we accepted everything as it was: rain, snow, wind, whatever happened.
Although sometimes we had to rearrange the order of scenes to catch a more favorable position of the sun. But Vancouver's rain worked especially well in the night scenes. Wet roads would catch the light and create beautiful reflections. This is called a wet down. If not naturally present, the asphalt is simply sprayed with a hose. The city's climate thus saved the show money. Interestingly, many episodes, including those in the cemetery, used powerful lights to imitate moonlight. But the final battle of the second season had to be shot in a studio. This was one of those rare cases when unpredictable weather forced the crew to change their plans. I'm amazed at how well the location was constructed, given all the limitations. And there's one more thing that played a critical role in shaping the visuals. That is the atmospheric haze. Although viewers often don't notice it, it helps make the air appear denser and gives the frame a pleasant, grainy texture, which allows the cinematographer and lighting crew to create creative lighting solutions. In almost every scene, it was created using smoke machines about the size of a fire extinguisher, and they operated on vegetable oil. This is an important detail, because an oil-based solution creates a denser and longer-lasting fog compared to water-based mixtures. The film crew used 2 different atmospheric effects. The first is haze, which I just described. It was used in most scenes, while the second was fog. Fog is more like a thick mist that can obscure objects and reduce visibility. The haze was extremely important for the series. It allowed ordinary locations to be transformed into mystical and unsettling spaces. But most importantly, it made the beams of light visible in the frame. This is called volumetric lighting. It makes the light tangible and the frame becomes deeper. Directors often use beams as a way to guide the viewer's gaze or to show a character's special state. In this scene, the beam from the window symbolizes enlightenment. The woman is convinced she saw an angel. And in this scene, the beams literally lead the characters to the ghost's body. Moonbeams and sunbeams in the frame break through windows and roofs thanks to powerful sources of hard light, spotlights, par lamps, and Fresnel lenses which focus the beam. And in open areas, especially bright HMI film lights are used. By the way, in culture, this light has another name, God's rays. The same idea of tangible light continues in the scenes with the flashlight. They became another important element of the series. After the daytime scenes with divine rays, they create the opposite feeling, intimate and tense. In the darkness, the flashlight illuminates only part of the scene, leaving everything else off screen. That's why the viewer sees what's happening in fragments together with the protagonist. But this works not only in a literal sense. The flashlight guides through darkness, a symbol of hope and a search for truth. That's why a small beam in a dark room highlights the character's isolation and vulnerability. In this way, the series revisits the struggle between light and darkness. But what I like most is how the crew lights the faces. Here, the split lighting technique is often used, which is based on leaving half of the character's face in shadow. This hides part of their emotions, makes the character more mysterious, and reflects their inner conflict. It works flawlessly. Kim Manners and Serge Ladouceur spent a long time developing this approach to filming and lighting. It was thanks to this that Sam and Dean didn't just look like two handsome guys, but like modern knights of darkness from Greek legends. This technique comes from film noir and chiaroscuro, the classic balance of light and shadow in painting, and it fit perfectly into a story about heroes who are constantly balancing between light and darkness. Sometimes, rarer lighting techniques are used. For example, illuminating the eyes through a mirror highlights the gaze and intensifies the tension. Light reflected from water emphasizes its danger. And in the prison scene, a beam of light falling on Dean through a crack in the door creates a sense of loneliness and hopelessness. But there are shots that I truly admire. The shadows from the rain on Dean's face look like tears in a difficult moment. And there's a similar idea with Sam, whose face has text projected directly onto it, emphasizing how deeply he's immersed in studying the subject. In the end, you could say that shadows in Supernatural work like a void that each viewer fills in themselves. This is most evident in the episode Shadows, which became the quintessence of noir in the series. Menres ordered a true shadow theater. In the plot, shadows came to life. Actors needed exact precision, as light formed the basis of many scenes. It was tough for everyone, from the camera crew to the effects artists. It was a real challenge, but the effort paid off, and the episode became truly legendary. Alright, but what else unites all these shots? Color correction, obviously. We could go on and on about how cool the color is here, but what's the point? You already know that perfectly well. Let's better talk about why it's so cool. First of all, in a dark series about fighting evil spirits, the saturation is lowered so you don't accidentally think there's any place for bright, lively colors in this world. Secondly, and paradoxically, there are still plenty of saturated colors, and maybe that's precisely because the bleach bypass here was done digitally. A brief historical digression. Originally, it was a film processing technique. The process involves not removing, or only partially removing, the silver layer during development. Open a color frame in Photoshop, copy the layer in black and white, and set it to overlay mode. This mutes the colors, deepening darks and brightening lights. That's it. So, even if you're shooting on film, it's more logical doing color correction on the computer, as that lets you adjust each scene individually. Besides, we're working on a series with over 20 episodes a year. We need to work quickly without risking film damage. But interestingly, despite all this, at the end of the second season there was an episode that broke the mold and used a saturated image to make viewers who had gotten used to muted colors feel uneasy. A couple of years later, this trick was repeated, and even more impressively than before. The color disappears right before our eyes. So as I already mentioned, the series does have plenty of vibrant colors. They are needed to add subtext to the frame or to influence your mood. Keep in mind that in different contexts, the same color can work in different ways. For example, red can reflect themes of love, passion, and desire, while yellow can be associated with friendship, joy, and hope. But at the same time, red can symbolize danger, anger, and violence, while yellow can suggest cowardice, deceit, and betrayal. In our case, red and yellow are markers of the demonic. As the series gradually reveals Meg's intentions, we see how her wardrobe changes. At first, it's an unremarkable brown jacket, then a pink sweater with red in the background, and by the end of the episode, we see her in a blood red shirt and a yellow leather jacket. From that moment on, all her appearances were accompanied by these colors, not only in the decorations and clothing, but also in the lighting. Throughout the entire 21st episode, the color red hints at danger and the interference of demons, the main one being the yellow-eyed demon. In scenes connected to him, double yellow elements appear several times. Here you have yellow doors, 2 floor lamps, yellow flowers on the windowsill, and even an unusual fire truck. The culmination of this symbolism was the house at the end of the first season, whose windows also resemble yellow eyes. This is how these two colors gradually evolved from a detail for the most attentive viewers into a part of the visual style. At the same time, red and blue in the first 5 seasons serve as a visual marker of conflict. Blue represents Dean, rationality, and loyalty. Red represents Sam, blood, and impulsiveness. If both colors are present, it signals harmony between the brothers, but if only one appears, there is a conflict. However, it's more complex. For example, behind Dean is a blue vending machine labeled cold. Here, it symbolizes death and coldness, highlighting the episode's hopelessness. and blue in Sam's surroundings can emphasize his isolation and unfamiliar environment. In the same episode, there's an interesting shot where Sam and Dean are sitting across from each other and the colors of the room reflect their state. Behind the dying Dean, there is black wallpaper, while behind Sam, it's green, just like the green color of the carpet, which visually grounds the brothers and gives hope for salvation. Though colors linked to the Winchesters, they can also be used differently. In short, rules aren't fixed. The crew uses colors to let viewers subtly feel the characters' emotions, and balance doesn't mean there's no danger. And in addition to pure bright colors, the classic cinematic blue-orange scheme appears from time to time. And this isn't some kind of deep symbolism, but simply a way to make the color more interesting or to emphasize conflict. Such scenes don't stand out from the overall palette and neatly support the show's visual style. But despite my love for the earlier seasons, the best episode in terms of color is the beginning of season 4, because here the colors foreshadow the role each character will play throughout the season. For Dean, it's green, the color of life, which is what he'll be fighting for. For Sam, it's red, the color of blood, which is what he'll be fighting against. And for Castiel, it's blue, representing vast spaces like the sky and ocean. Here, it highlights the otherworldly, mysterious nature of angels rather than just a specific role. All of this fits and further develops the previous concepts. By the way, the same person was responsible for the color grading from the first to the last season. His name is Steve Arkell, and unfortunately he is rarely mentioned, even though it was he and his synergy with Serge that made the show's color palette so recognizable. But what probably didn't have much impact on the show's recognizability was the cinematography. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it here. On the contrary, it's simply magnificent. It's just that lighting, color grading, and even the set design are things we notice right away. But as for the work of the cinematographer, well, you really need to have a trained eye to notice it, because it's not just about camera movement, but also perspective, shooting angle, and even how the characters are positioned in the frame. And the show had its own recurring tricks that tied different episodes together. The first noticeable technique is the use of establishing shots. Essentially, it's just a shot that shows where the events are taking place or indicates that some time has passed. But in this series, these shots help to create an immersive atmosphere, making the mystique feel more tangible, and giving each American town its own distinct vibe. And it doesn't matter what it is, a university, a roadside bar, or a church, you instantly get immersed in the events. Sometimes these shots are even shown after certain events to expand the meaning of the scene or deepen the emotional immersion. Yes, this is a standard cinematic technique, but in this case, it not only helps to visually separate scenes, it also becomes a part of the style that serves the story and creates a sense of suspense and anxiety. Now, let's talk about a less obvious thing: shooting from below. Most often the series uses this to show a person's vulnerability. For example, Sam's discomfort when they broke into someone else's house to spend the night. But it's also used to create a sense of anxiety. This angle makes the character appear visually larger, emphasizing their strength and dominance. In one of the episodes we observe the characters from the basement, and this helps viewers feel the main character's sense of confinement and helplessness. By using low angles, the cinematographer conveys themes of power, fear, and emotional tension. From a perspective standpoint, this angle also helps to reveal the space in an unusual way and make the character stand out against the background. On the other hand, shooting from above works in the opposite way. It creates distance, but at the same time can also reflect vulnerability, making the character appear small and visually insignificant. Sometimes it looks as if we are watching the characters through a surveillance camera, and other times we are looking straight down at a 90-degree angle. But this is more like the viewpoint of God, and it can work in different ways. Here, umbrellas look like conspirators' shields hiding their shame. Here, cold calculation makes people just evidence. And here, the environment presses on the character, isolating them. But often, it's simpler. The overhead angle helps to assess the setting and the scale of events, showing what is hidden from the ground. By the way, overhead shots are planned much more carefully by the cinematographer than low-angle ones, because open locations require special cranes, which also impacts the budget. Another important technique is the Dutch angle. This is when the camera is deliberately tilted to break the horizon, and our brain instinctively perceives this as a disruption of the usual order. In the case of this shot, the Dutch angle symbolizes the strangeness of the hotel and at the same time reflects the tension between the brothers. In the shot from the staircase in the hospital, the extreme tilt creates a sense of dizziness and an endless labyrinth, but sometimes it's pure psychology, like in the scene on the road. Here, the horizon is tilted to show Dean's inner conflict as he faces a choice. This is a targeted technique that creates discomfort and immerses us in the conflict. Next comes the tracking camera, which has become a hallmark of thrillers and horror films. When we observe the characters from the side, it creates a sense of surveillance. This way, the cameraman builds suspense and sets the pace, making the fear feel personal even in static scenes. Most often, this method is used directly to show the brothers or the victim through the eyes of the monster. But there are also more subtle examples. In the episode about the lake ghost, there are shots of someone watching the girl, and since we see her from the forest, fans speculate that it's the brother secretly spying on his sister. Of course, this isn't confirmed in any way, but the hint of voyeurism makes the scene layered and creepy. By the way, framing is often used together with surveillance. That's when characters are boxed in by frames created by objects in the foreground. Such a barrier between the character and the viewer enhances the feeling of being watched, making the environment part of the narrative. But the main thing is that, thanks to this visual confinement, the cinematographer constantly reminds us that the characters literally live within these frames, cut off from normal life. In the scene where Dean stands next to his first love, the doorway visually separates them, conveying complex feelings and distance between them without words. However, framing can not only divide, but also manipulate our perception. Look at this triangular composition, where the framing and the light from the window subconsciously make us perceive the woman as kind. But this visual trap is only there to deceive our expectations. But the most creative frames in the series are the mirrors. The episode about Bloody Mary was a perfect fit to showcase the power of their duality. Here, the mirror is not just a reflection, it's a projection of guilt and the main weapon in the ghost's hands. From a production standpoint, the power of mirrors lies in the fact that they help avoid cliched solutions in dialogues, making scenes more cinematic by eliminating cuts. And in the scene with the shapeshifter, the mirror acts as a lie detector, hinting that this isn't really Dean. And now take a look at this shot. First we see a photo of the deceased boy, and then the focus shifts to the glass where his mother's face is reflected. With a single focus shift, the cinematographer connects the memory of the son with the mother's pain. And this technique is used constantly. The cinematographer smoothly shifts focus from one character to another within a single shot without breaking the scene with editing cuts. Technically, it's harder. You must know the dialogue's rhythm and the actor's movements exactly, but in return, this subtle technique ensures continuity, making the brothers' relationship feel truer and the drama denser and more alive. By the way, the dialogues in the series are often shot with a two-shot, bringing the brothers together in the same frame, and because of this, the viewer perceives Sam and Dean as a single team, even when they're arguing. Plus, soft over-the-shoulder shots are used, where the camera moves more freely than in the classic shot-reverse shot setup. This way, the shot looks less like textbook work. At the same time, the camera is constantly juggling shots, emphasizing the character's loneliness, and the cinematographer doesn't forget to move the camera along with the actors, giving the dialogue's direction and giving us a sense of involvement. This movement becomes a tool that sets the mood of the scene and conveys the nuances of the relationships. And there was a lot to convey. The crew quickly realized just how strong the chemistry was between the actors. Their main task was to film the actors in such a way that the dark mystical thriller wouldn't turn into this. After all, Padalecki is noticeably taller than his partner, so to visually balance the brothers, the camera was lowered just below Jared's eye line, and the overall composition was built around the actors, not according to templates, and they were filmed as if they were a single character. The brothers often moved in sync, and the camera picked up on this rhythm, emphasizing their partnership. And in group scenes, wide-angle lenses made them the visual anchor and smoothed out the height difference through perspective. And for the sake of naturalness, many dialogues were shot with two cameras at once. That way the actors don't have to perform into the void, reactions stay lively, and filming takes fewer takes. But don't think everything revolved around the Winchesters.
The importance of the show's main characters in the frame's composition depends on the story. Of course, we highlight our main characters through camera angles and composition, but that's only for the key shots. After that, I rely on the director's vision, because my job is to help him achieve his goal.
By the way, many directors, and Serge himself, liked wide-angle lenses. In city scenes, the field of view is often exaggerated. This creates a sense of small-town America. The world looks real but slightly grotesque, and the background stops being just a set piece. This also benefits the scenes with the Impala. The dynamics and scale increase, and the slight barrel distortion creates the feeling that reality is a bit warped. And the wide-angle lens also emphasizes loneliness and anxiety, helping the space reflect the character's state of mind. In general, the environment is used constantly. Monsters interact with the characters through the environment, using shadows, frost, and even steam to leave messages. I consider this shot especially successful because of the camera angle, since when working with practical effects, the camera plays a key role. The sharp zoom in gives the door closing a real physical weight. And in the scene where the invisible hook scrapes the wall, they used a fake panel with a mechanism. But it is precisely the camera setup and chosen perspective that guide our gaze, breathing life into this shot. And the culmination of this approach is the hospital scene, filmed in a single take. Here, the camera acts as a conduit between the world of the living and the dead. As it rotates, Eccles sometimes hides behind the operator's back, then reappears in the frame. So without a single cut, we are shown both what Sam sees and what is actually happening. But great cinematography is measured not by the complexity of the trick, but by its appropriateness. At times, a simple but well-constructed scene can deepen the story much more profoundly. And here's the perfect example. In the first shot, Joe is sitting in the center of a dark room, framed by bright windows. This symmetry is a metaphor for her tunnel vision and naive romanticization of hunting. Dean paces in the background and breaks up this composition. He brings chaos into the frame, shattering her illusions. The next shot makes this motif even more obvious. Behind Joe is a bright, clean wall, while behind Dean, there is darkness receding into the depths. The cinematographer visually contrasts the characters, emphasizing Dean's intention to shield her from the darkness he has to live in. And in the second example, the cinematographer does the opposite. He pulls Dean out of his usual cramped space into a vast openness, which emphasizes his willingness to open up his feelings to his brother. The scene opens with a complex crane shot from above, setting the scale. Then the camera descends to the ground, slowly glides toward the brothers, and finally switches to handheld shooting to show their dialogue in one long, unhurried shot. This helps us experience the scene from the inside. Then the cameraman circles around the car and frames the shot to remove everything unnecessary from it. Then only at the very end are we allowed to get close to their faces, focusing on the emotions. The film crew put a lot of effort into choosing the locations and the time of day for a reason. This scene is the true finale of the first season. I think the entire zombie episode was written for the sake of a single line: the dead should stay dead. This is his admission of survivor's guilt. The moment when he breaks down and cries for the first time, sharing his pain with his brother, which is completely unlike him. And the scene ends with a wide shot. The brothers stand by the Impala, unprotected. No motel, no walls, just the indifferent forest. This is how the director reminds us just how high the stakes are for these people. And maybe that's why I love the cinematography in Supernatural. The crew used every tool to the fullest and weren't afraid of challenges, telling their story in the language of big cinema. And for low-budget TV shows of that time, that's truly rare. But the show's visual style doesn't end with the cinematography. It's just one of the elements the team used to construct their own version of America, not the glossy one from advertisements, but a more provincial and grounded version of America expressed through winding roads, roadside bars, old gas stations, and roadside motels. When John Marcinjuk was asked what he liked most about working on the first season, he answered simply, "Motels." Essentially, such a room is just 4 walls and a couple of beds. But the set decorators strive to invent something new each time, giving every room its own distinctive character through different vibrant wallpapers, walls, paintings, bedspreads, and elegant curtains.
Our meticulous set design is a very delicate matter, because we have to create what people completely take for granted. After all, the viewer shouldn't be asking where we are or what this place is.
The interior of the room helped reveal the characters' personalities, set the mood for the episode, and aimed to convey the feeling of a specific place. And for the brothers, motels are not just a place to sleep, they're a way of life. They literally grew up in different motels. By the end of the series, Jerry O'Connell's team had created 176 motels and hotels. And over time, they became a kind of anthology of images of American life. And this didn't just apply to motels. The team was constantly reinventing the sets. The same location could become a hospital, an asylum, or even part of a prison. And for an auction house, an ordinary furniture store would be completely packed with antiques and exquisite masterpieces of fine art. This way, the series saved on the budget, but viewers still believed every time that they were in a new place. And although the guys didn't have a home in the usual sense, they had the Impala. And while the motels changed every week, the Impala was always with them from the very beginning of this story. It is the scenes in the car that become the setting for candid conversations, family arguments, and meaningful silences. The interior of the Impala evokes a sense of intimacy and claustrophobia at the same time. Here decisions are made, conflicts intensify, and not only the characters' kinship is revealed, but also their loneliness. The car itself became something like the Winchester's legacy. This is where they keep their music tapes and weapons. They also sleep there, store their clothes, and do other things. It's hard to imagine Supernatural without the Impala. Without it, the brothers' relationship would lose its main enclosed space, and the series itself would lose its signature road movie atmosphere. Surprisingly, Kripke originally wanted to use a different car. Fortunately, his neighbor talked him out of it in time, suggesting the Impala instead, arguing that a corpse would easily fit in its trunk. Kripke always considered it the third main character, and this character needed its own silhouette, personality, and voice.
Let's go home. You know what? We are home. There's my girl.
Viewers should recognize the car before it's on screen. They spent ages picking the sound for the engine and every door. After the events of the first season finale, the Impala becomes a symbol of Dean's fight for his life. And that scene where he starts smashing it with a crowbar perfectly demonstrated just how broken he was. After all, the viewer knows that Dean loves his car to death, a car he inherited from his father and which became something of a sanctuary. And since the events of the series take place in 2005, the show was filled with retro technology. It was a time when technology was advanced enough to make our lives better, but not advanced enough to consume them. All those audio cassettes, payphones, and laptops create the atmosphere of a pre-smartphone era. And all of this not only allows the series to maintain the authenticity of the 2000s, but also creates a unique visual style that only becomes more valuable with time. Thanks to the retro technology, the world of the series feels more tangible. Every object had its own purpose. Phones still couldn't record quality video, and to access the internet, you still needed a laptop. And these imperfect technologies make the world of horror not only more aesthetic, but also help the series maintain a sense of mystery. That's why every time an old tape recorder, a game console, or a flip phone appears in the series, the world feels more alive and tangible. And that's not all. In the early seasons, the guys are constantly working with real newspapers, clippings, and handwritten notes. And even though the internet already existed back then, paper media constantly had their place on screen. Information had a higher value at that time. It wasn't just an abstract line on a phone, but a physical object you could actually touch. Hence the lively interaction with letters, paper maps, and various books, which reflected the idea that information not only had to be found, but also understood. Thus, one of the most important items in Supernatural became John Winchester's journal. It's not just a useful source of information about monsters, it's a physical form of family legacy. The journal helps the brothers investigate cases, but at the same time constantly brings them back to their father, to his pain, paranoia, and obsession. Each time they turn to the journal, the brothers get to know their father better, while also adding a new layer of family trauma and unspoken truths to the story. Its detailed pages, filled with handwritten notes, drawings, and clippings, turn the journal into a true artifact of the series, carrying emotional weight not only for the characters but also for the viewers. Another equally important artifact was the Colt, and although at first it seemed like an object capable of ending the hunt for Azazel, for the series it became a symbol that even the most powerful evil has its vulnerability. For Sam and Dean, in turn, it became their only hope for victory. The internal tension is largely due to the limited number of bullets. Every shot from the Colt becomes not just an action, but an anticipated event. The Colt appears and disappears again, almost always changing the rules of the game. Its repair, search, loss, or mysterious status make it not just a weapon, but one of the objects on which the show's mythology rests. And all of this directly influenced how the Colt looks and how it is presented in the series. Another important part of the series was the Winchester's clothing. They can't simply walk through the front door and announce to the world, "Hello, we are professional monster hunters."
Federal Marshals.
Environmental study majors.
I'm Father Simmons, U.S. Wildlife Service.
Nigel Tufnell.
Dr. Jerry Kaplan.
Reporters,
Drug dealers.
Rangers, students, fraternity brothers.
Homeland Security? Pretty illegal, even for us.
That is exactly why they must constantly disguise themselves to stay under the radar. Sam and Dean didn't just put on different clothes, they fully immersed themselves in various roles and complex professions to blend in. As it turned out, Dean absolutely loved the thrill of these elaborate disguises, finding them fun and exciting, while Sam often felt incredibly uncomfortable and out of place in his new skin.
tone it down a little bit, Father?
The constant change of roles kept things unpredictable. The brothers didn't look like professionals. They lied, improvised, and sometimes got caught in their lies. And this comical awkwardness made them more human.
Dean, just not that card.
What?
It says here, swimsuit inspector.
Unfortunately, over time, they started almost always introducing themselves as FBI agents. On the one hand, this shows the character's growth and reflects the shift in the show's tone. But on the other hand, it takes away an important part of its unique aesthetic and makes the story more monotonous and predictable. If the brothers' uniforms were intentionally made a bit shorter or tighter, then their regular outfits were perfectly calibrated. Dean almost always wore a leather jacket. It was a protective sort of armor, something that effectively helped him look older, stronger, and completely in control, even when he wasn't quite ready for it yet. At the same time, the jacket directly connects him to his father. Dean literally builds his image from John's legacy. He wears his clothes, drives his car, listens to his music, and tries to carry on his work. And since he was always carrying his father's journal as well, the costume designers had to make large pockets in all his jackets. In turn, Sam preferred more practical work clothes. Most often you can see him in a Carhartt G130 jacket, which reflects his desire to look like a regular person from the real world, not his father's soldier. In the end, clothing is not just part of their image, but a way to tell the brothers' family story and highlight the differences between them. Ironically, Carhartt workwear has now become fashionable, which makes it pretty hard to snag a jacket like Sam's at a reasonable price. I haven't managed to do it yet, although I did buy myself another model with a similar vibe. By the way, fans of the show maintain an entire archive of the brothers' clothing. I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, it's time to talk about why the show is even called Supernatural. Monsters. In the series, they were rarely made entirely with CGI. Most often, the team would take an ordinary person and change just one detail: black eyes, vampire teeth, or an unnaturally wide-open mouth. This way, the CGI enhanced the actors' performances instead of trying to replace them. Back when filming Phantom Traveler, the creators decided that demons would look like a cloud of black smoke that pours into a person's mouth. It was originally a solution for just one episode, but in the end, it became a hallmark of the series, even though the smoke changed a bit. Moreover, the effect doesn't have to be big to work. Sometimes to convey horror, all you need is a flying knife whose tip touches a tear. But even such relatively simple CGI could require a lot of time, which is why some of the effects decisions are still impressive today. To create the silhouette in the fire, a stuntman was dressed in a special fireproof suit and set on fire. Then, he had to blindly walk along a specific route so he could be filmed against a black background, and these shots were then composited into the scene. But in this scene, there was no CGI at all. For it, they created a double of Jensen. The double lay motionless in a gelatin mask and spent the entire shooting day eating through a straw. And I swear, I only noticed this recently, but this shot with the helicopter is entirely made with CGI. The team had to climb skyscrapers in downtown Vancouver and photograph the buildings for textures. Altogether, this scene took 5.5 weeks to complete. The Beatles episode was also filmed with tens of thousands of real bees. However, the camera still couldn't see them, so in the end, they were added using CGI. As for the first shots in the sauna and spider scenes, they were often filmed using a green screen. But these were so expensive that the team started mixing footage shot in different ways. In some cases, they filmed a real road, while in others, they simulated movement with light directly on set using a huge PMP rig. But they didn't abandon CGI either. Although, starting from the second season, the team had their own VFX department, which made production cheaper and faster. And that's why the CGI in the series looks so organic. The team would discuss in advance how the effects should look and which method would be best to achieve it. First and foremost, the series relied on makeup, stunts, and practical effects, and only then on CGI. But there's another important piece of the puzzle that directly influenced the show's atmosphere: music. No, I understand that music doesn't affect the visuals.
You humming Metallica?
Calms me down.
Or does it? Yes, the soundtrack in Supernatural was truly legendary. There's AC/DC, Green Day, the Rolling Stones, and even the Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne. And that's just a small part of what you can hear. Although, on streaming services, something else is playing. It depends on the platform. Personally, I have the Blu-ray version. If you remember, in the pilot episode, there was even a scene whose sole purpose was to introduce us to the brothers and Dean's musical taste. Every track was selected by manually going through Kripke's personal collection. Yes, I spent an hour explaining how important the team was, but it's him we should thank for the soundtrack. At the start of the first season, Eric had to threaten the studio with quitting and write the soundtrack into the script so it couldn't be cut. That's why sometimes the lyrics of a song perfectly match what's happening on screen. They had to pay thousands of dollars for segments just 20 seconds long, but the music that embodied the spirit of the American Midwest became the heart of the show. And although Dean Winchester is a huge fan of Led Zeppelin, you won't hear their songs in the series because the license was just too expensive.
Me one more time.
Zeppelin rules.
That's right. Up high.
But the track Carry On by Kansas became the unofficial anthem of the show. It was first played at the end of the first season, and since then it has become a tradition. As for the original soundtrack, composers Christopher Lennertz and Jay Gruska were responsible for it in the show. The first was a friend of Kripke's from college, and the second was brought in by Robert Singer. Christopher's very first music for the pilot episode was nominated for an Emmy. I could talk about the music and its influence for a very long time, but unfortunately I can't play it because of copyright. That's why I put together a playlist with the show's soundtrack, where every track was added manually. The link, as always, is in the description. And since I've already gotten sidetracked from the visuals, it's worth talking a bit about the show's dubbing. I first watched it 10 years ago in Russian, dubbed by Ren TV. Among fans of the show in the post-Soviet space, their dubbing is considered the gold standard of quality, and I agree with that. But there's one problem. Not long ago I watched Supernatural in English for the first time, and it sounds much scarier that way. No matter how you look at it, dubbing sounds studio-produced, the speech becomes too clean and precise. In the original, the actors speak more quietly and truly live through the scene. But in reality, what's important isn't how the character speaks most of the time, but how they react to events. In my opinion, only one of these scenes sounds natural, and this guy only sounds scared in English. So yes, while the Ren TV dubbing is undeniably of a very high quality, it unfortunately ends up killing the sense of realism in the series, and as a direct result, it completely breaks the underlying horror element that makes the show so effective. Okay, it's time to talk about why the show started to look worse over time. Let's set the record straight right away. I love all of Supernatural from start to finish, despite its ups and downs. So right now, I'm not going to criticize it. I'm just going to try to figure out why the show and its visuals changed. The main reason the visuals started to look worse is the budget. From the very beginning, Eric Kripke and Robert Singer had to fight just to keep the show alive. They were constantly forced to sacrifice different scenes and decisions just to make sure the show had enough money. In other words, even what they managed to do in the early seasons was only possible thanks to a combination of factors and the team's tremendous dedication. Yes, nominally the show's budget could increase, but in reality, due to inflation, it stayed more or less the same, although some seasons did see a drop. But over the years, Jared and Jensen became more expensive, as did the rest of the cast, so the budget just started being allocated differently. I don't have data for every season, so here both official reports and fan analyses are mixed together. But this table does a good job of explaining what actually happened. In short, over time, fixed expenses like actors and crew kept increasing, while there was less and less money left for visuals and creativity. That is, at some point, due to the budget, inflation, and the network's policies, the show began to abandon the very things that had defined its style. One of those things that made the early seasons feel more real was the large-scale scenes. I'm still amazed by the shots filmed at the real Vancouver airport, as well as the scenes with the crashed plane inside the hangar. Moments like these made the series seem more expensive than it actually was. Every time there was a murder or an episode was coming to an end, we would see ambulances, police officers, firefighters, or just a crowd of onlookers. Thanks to such scenes, the show felt richer. The world stopped revolving solely around the Winchesters, and it allowed us to appreciate the scale of the events. Unfortunately, over time, the show had less and less money for extras and large, detailed locations, which made Vancouver look less and less like America. And as it happened, the heart of the show suffered as well. By the third season, the amount of classic rock had significantly decreased. The team literally had to choose between filming a scene and paying for the rights to a famous track. Cheaper tracks started to be used more and more often in bar scenes. Over time, the music became increasingly background, no longer revealing the characters or setting the mood. Of course, iconic rock still appeared from time to time, For the 13th season, they bought the license for Metallica's Nothing Else Matters, but apparently such an expensive song ate up most of the music budget for the entire season. As the show progressed, a bunker was introduced to stabilize production. It was a huge permanent set in a 1950s industrial decor style which became a true home for Sam and Dean. A significant part of the plot events now took place there. This made things easier for the writers, directors, and lighting crew because the series could return to the same space again and again. But this dealt a heavy blow to the road movie philosophy. The atmosphere of travel faded into the background, and the structure of the series became increasingly sitcom-like. The color grading also played a role, which at some point basically disappeared. Starting from the 3rd season, the visuals became brighter and more saturated. It's hard to pin the blame on just one person here. On the one hand, the network wanted this. On the other, Kripke himself admitted that it was his experiment. The idea was to keep only the scary scenes dark. It didn't turn out very well. Before the 4th season, the young Sarah suggested returning to the roots, and the showrunner agreed. But the old darkness was already gone. The series was searching for a balance between the network's wishes, the team's taste, and the new digital cameras which sometimes produced noise in the dark. Then, the early style faltered. During season 4, Kim Manners died, the showrunner changed, and budget cuts limited time for lighting and cinematography. Consequently, from season 7, visuals grew simpler. The horror atmosphere faded, prioritizing clear visibility in every frame. I have a perfect example of how the style changed. Take a look at both scenes. Previously, the shot was composed with an emphasis on mystery. The darkness added a sense of danger, and the forest looked chaotic and wild. In the 7th season, the forest looks tidier, the deep shadows are gone, and the contrast has disappeared. The same thing happened in close-ups. The signature split lighting on faces disappeared. Lighting in the frame stopped being a tool for drama. The complex interplay of highlights and shadows disappeared, and the image became more natural and less authentic. And even if the signature look were brought back, the picture would not be as deep as before, because the show's visual style was defined by the story, and that too began to change. Originally, the show focused on the monster of the week concept, but because of the chemistry between the actors, the focus gradually shifted to Sam and Dean. The early seasons maintained a good balance thanks to a restrained mythology and a narrow framework. One case, one town, and one family trauma. Each new monster helped develop the brothers' relationship and the theme of family. And this is explained quite simply. In local storylines, the focus of the narrative was on human conflicts with personal dramas. Stories about families, ghosts, or ordinary maniacs were short but emotionally intense, and it was easier for the audience to empathize with the characters because the stakes were more relatable. When those boundaries started to disappear, the mythology expanded, and the stakes kept getting higher. One apocalypse followed another, which led to a kind of stakes inflation. New villains tried to be bigger and scarier while the old ones lost their value. This was especially noticeable when the show brought back former antagonists who had already lost their former greatness. But when the threat reaches a universal scale, the viewer stops feeling a real connection to what's happening. The story becomes less focused and loses its tension. In the early seasons, the principle of limited threats worked. Demons appeared rarely, which created suspense and fear, but the more of them there were, the more they lost their uniqueness. In general, simple and vivid characters often worked as archetypes. The Winchester's confrontation with the yellow-eyed demon was a battle of good versus evil. When the main villain is almost absolute evil, it creates a sense of a large-scale and, more importantly, understandable threat. The viewer intuitively senses the danger and becomes engaged in the plot. This clarity made the early conflicts simple but tense. As the series progresses, moral boundaries become blurred, with good vampires, bad hunters, and manipulative angels appearing. And Sam and Dean increasingly find themselves having to do questionable things for the right reasons. And of course, this makes the story more layered and mature. The show can't rely on basic conflicts for 15 years. But at the same time, the psychological simplicity that early magic was built on disappears. At the same time, it's amusing that while the morality became more complex, the investigations, on the contrary, became simpler. When the show introduced a developed internet and the brothers moved into a bunker filled with books, an effect of information overload emerged. Finding the answer to the question, how do we defeat the monster, became too easy. Remember when Sam disappeared in the episode The Benders? Dean had to go to the police to get access to the cameras and pick up the trail. The investigation used to be dangerous and intriguing, but gradually the Winchesters turned into hackers capable of breaking into anything. And the show's creators are well aware of this.
Okay, ready to head out? Go knock on some doors?
Doors?
Yeah. Talk to the neighbors, hit up all the records, work the case. We still do that, right?
Sometimes. But the internet has made a lot of that legwork obsolete. I mean, I'm already in the St. Paul Police Department database.
Turning hunting into office work greatly affected the show's dynamics. Remember how it used to be. Investigations were physical labor. The brothers were constantly making mistakes. Some of the work led to dead ends and some depended on luck and intuition. For me, manually digging through information, which required effort and time, was an important part of the adventure. This was the foundation of the show's narrative. Back then, the Winchesters conducted interrogations, consulted experts and historians, dug through newspaper archives, and spent time in libraries with unnaturally dim lighting and gloomy halls. Such places added to the feeling of an endless journey and were part of the show's atmosphere. It was these kinds of details that created the texture of the hunt. Though the internet existed then, it hadn't replaced full investigations. Even mundane web research was presented dramatically. This way, detail by detail, the show lost its unique visual style, relying increasingly on the actors. And the production crew wasn't to blame for this. Putting all this together, I realized why Supernatural stood out so much compared to other projects. In the early seasons, the team pushed themselves to make every shot interesting, even if it only lasted a couple of seconds. But viewers loved Supernatural, not for its high stakes and epic battles, but for its human values, for the stories about ordinary people who experience terrifying things, for the textured characters you see on screen and immediately believe that the story is real. The visuals, music, and cinematography only emphasized all of this. Creating this video was the hardest thing I've ever done. I would really appreciate it if you supported me with a like, shared the link with someone, and checked out my other videos. For example, I have a video about the final season of the show. And if you want to recreate the show's color grading in your own photos, head over to my Telegram channel. There, I've uploaded my own preset for Photoshop and Lightroom. In the comments, tell me how you first discovered the show. You can also share your favorite episodes. This was Vovchan. See you.